The movie begins with 3 people sitting in a restaurant. One of them, Mike, says last year he reached out to a few foundations to see if anyone wanted to invest in something we don't know about. But by the time they reached back to him, he didn't need the money anymore, because he and his friends were already funded. Last night, Mike sent an email to certain people. He wasn't expecting them to reply as fast as they did. They said they were still interested in these people's movies. The man named Will asks how they know this won't fail. Mike replies, they don't know. However, even if it does fail, it will only bring them to where they are now. Thus Mike repeats that the people want to fund their movie and asks what they have to lose. This persuades Will. The next scene has 4 people sitting in a car parked outside a house. 2 of them are ones we've seen at the restaurant, whilst the other 2 are new. Will looks at 3 people standing beside the entrance of the house. Brian asks if they are going to exit the vehicle or just let the people outside stare at them. Will says he's still considering it. Suddenly, Mike knocks on the window from outside, startling them. He asks if they are coming out. When they all exit and walk toward the people near the house, the man, Nolan, hugs Mike. He introduces Mike to his wife, Linda, and their daughter, Grace. Seeing Will, Nolan says he is the filmmaker who arrived to save them all. Will introduces him to his wife, Michelle, before he does to the producer, Sid. Lastly, he introduces his actor friend, Brian. Then a new person rushes in to join them all. Mike says she is Janelle, and we learn she is going to play the second lead in the film. Mike calls her amazing. Once the group enters the house, Sid wants to talk to Mike in private. She declares that Janelle is not playing the second lead. She adds casting has been complete for months. Mike says the casting can change. If they pull this movie off, he believes it will be thanks to him. Sid firmly says all of his investors are nonsense like him. She walks away angrily, repeating that Janelle is not playing the second lead. To himself, Mike says they will see about that. During dinner inside the house, Nolan's son, Marshall, talks about a dangerous scene he was filming. A certain actress was too scared to do a stunt, but Marshall went against her wishes and did something that allowed the stunt to be performed. Luckily, the actress was unharmed. Grace says despite the actress wanting to sue, Grace was happy they got the scene filmed. Marshall says he loved the film too much to change anything, because someone was scared of a little stunt. Afterward, Sid stands to announce how much they appreciate this opportunity the family has given them. When Brian goes to the restroom, Nolan wants to make a toast. He says he's a big believer in good things coming to those who wait. He has been waiting for a while for this movie to come. He admits that at the time Mike told him he got funding to secure their film, Nolan got jealous and bitter. Yet he knew their paths would cross again. And now, here they all are. They all present a toast to the movie they call Dark Lake. Switching to Brian, he checks his phone reception outside to learn he has none. Grace surprises him with her presence. She asks if he's going back in, to which he replies he is waiting on something. She tells him what he recently discovered, that the service is bad here. She sees him being tense and guesses he doesn't like any of this. He says he's never been a fan of small talk. As he's walking away, Grace says he should work on the social mask he wears. She thinks it might take him further. Left alone briefly, she notices a light flashing in the distance. Back at the dinner table, Nolan wants to have a word with Will in private. With him gone, Sid takes his place and asks if Michelle is okay. She answers that she has a very weird feeling about all of this. Although she compliments the family for helping them, she says they don't look like them. She worries they won't protect them for this reason. Alone with Will, Nolan takes 2 glasses to pour alcohol into, but Will says he's not much of a drinker. Nolan kindly asks him not to let the former drink alone on a special night like this one. This prompts Will to say he's always been a fan of a good bourbon. The man of the house says this bourbon will make him believe in God. Will is quick to start talking business by saying he knows what every investor's first question is. It is how the investor is going to get their money back. They developed a plan for this, Will says. He gives Nolan some paperwork, which the latter sets aside with disinterest. He interrupts Will's business talk by asking if he knows how much this bourbon costs. It happens to cost an impressive $25,000 for 1 bottle. Hearing this almost gets Will to choke on the drink. Nolan draws closer to Will, saying money and marketability mean very little to him. His children will talk to Will about those things. His wife, Linda, loves a good story. Nolan, however, claims to care about passion. The passion to do whatever it takes to achieve something, to be willing to perish for something. He emphasizes this is what he cares about. He asks Will if he has that kind of passion, because that is what Nolan wants to invest in. Will just nods his head. Shifting to the others, Linda tells her guests they are part of her family. They learn she was the one who selected Will's script. The family gets a decent amount of scripts, and she reads each word. She says one remembers the special ones. Then Marshall says they have an amazing group of actors who are on their way to the house. Sid says she doesn't understand, for they had a shooting draft, but Marshall reminds her they can't go into production unless they are given the money for it. Back to Will, he tells Nolan he quit his job. How is that for passion? He asks the man who gave a speech about it. He adds, Michelle does not know that he quit. Furthermore, he says the money might not be a big deal for Nolan, yet it is for Will and his team. He also says they have an amazing story that needs to be told. Once Nolan extends his hand for a handshake, he tells Will to go make a movie. In the meantime, Linda says the actors who are coming are some of the finest actors the family worked with. Marshall strongly suggests these actors be considered by the guests. Linda wants them to be open-minded to the possibilities. When Will returns to them, Linda advises the group to discuss this in private among themselves. She invites them to the living room for that. Now that the 6 of them are there, Will wants to know what was discussed. Brian says Will should not take Nolan's money, and Sid says he can't create this movie. Will demands for them to stop being cryptic. He considers his meeting with Nolan to have gone greatly, so Brian informs him of the arriving actors, which doesn't sound too bad to Will. Brian adds the actors will be allowed to make notes on Will's script. An argument develops, prompting Janelle to realize she should leave. The disagreement between Mike and Sid gets especially heated. Sid demands to know one thing he did for this film. This argument forces Mike to leave with Janelle. Will approaches his wife to ask her opinion. He says they are almost there, but she asks at what cost. Something about this does not feel right to her. Outside, Mike keeps complaining to himself about the mistreatment he is receiving from the people he helped. He also learns this area has no phone service before he gets surprised by Will's presence. He complains some more to Will about all of this. Janelle returns inside to collect the purse she had forgotten. While she's there, she tells the others Mike is not a bad person. Will wants to apologize to Mike. He says they should at least listen to the people who are helping them with their movie. Will says he can't do this without Mike, hence Mike agrees to it. The two return inside the house, where Mike says he and Will seem to be the only ones who care to have this movie made. Will stops him from talking further. He tells Sid maybe they can see this night through, words she has trouble hearing. Will declares they can't leave because the money for the movie is here. Soon Mike argues with Brian and insults his acting skills. Mike also says the reason Brian is there is that he is Will's puppet. This is the insult that pushes Brian over the edge. Will has to hold him back from getting physical with Mike. As the turmoil is happening, a masked person appears out of nowhere to scare everyone. It takes a moment for Brian to process this situation before he throws himself at the stranger, but he gets thrown off easily. Brian tries his luck with the masked stranger again and gets stabbed this time. Mike tries to help, only to get stabbed too. The stranger is about to stab Michelle, yet Will slams him with a baseball bat twice to bring him down. Brian removes the scary mask to reveal the culprit's face. He does not seem to be anyone they know. Then they focus on Mike, who has sustained a serious injury. Once they help him stand, Will advises the group to stick together. He encourages them to get out of there. They are getting ready to leave through the front doors, and Will says it doesn't feel right. Since Mike suffers a lot, he has to be set down. Janelle says her car is the closest to the house. She thinks she could get to it. Sid asks what if more culprits are waiting for her where she can't see them. However, Janelle decides to run to her car. It proves to have been an awful idea due to her getting shot in a few seconds. Will sees she is still alive. Although he tries to help her, a surprise shot instantly sets him back. They witness another culprit behind Janelle, bringing down an axe to take her life. When he comes near the door, Will locks it. Interestingly, the culprit does not attempt to break through the glass. Brian says Mike is hurt badly, and he thinks he could find a first aid kit, so he goes against Will's plan of staying together to search for it. Will says they have to find some weapons in this house. We switch to Brian frantically looking for the first aid kit in the washroom. A sound grabs his attention, causing him to open a door to find Grace hiding in the pantry. She pleads not to be destroyed prior to him taking her out. Brian holds a knife to her neck, asking the lady why she was hiding in there. Her reason is that she heard screaming, along with gunshots. He lets go of her and says this is not making any sense. They were attacked by 3 people in masks, he adds. But they took the life of 1. Since Grace walks to him, he presses her against the wall. He asks if she knows where her family is, which she does not. Brian says he doesn't think his group is the target. Shifting to Will, he frantically searches for weapons in the kitchen. Alas, he can't find any, and looks at his shaking hands. Returning to the others, he tends to Mike's wound. Then Brian joins them with Grace. She asks if they are okay, and Sid punches her down for such an inappropriate question. The woman does not get angry. She says she has a first aid kit upstairs that can help stop Mike's bleeding. The group has a hard time trusting her at a time like this, yet Brian doesn't think they have a choice. Thus, the group starts going upstairs with the injured Mike. We see Grace alone, collecting a first aid kit in the washroom. Will searches a room with Sid for anything they can find. While they do, Sid says Grace is lying to them. She adds they can test her by tossing her outside. She wonders why the woman would hide. Will guesses she hid out of fear. Sid believes if she heard gunshots, she would try to leave. Will does not know what to say to that. He approaches her, saying he needs her to help them get out of this. Regarding her concern about there not being a way out, he says they will find one. They stand to leave and observe lights from outside appear on the wall. Someone has arrived in a car. Will thinks it could be one of the actors. He wants them to get his attention before he exits his car. In the next scene, Brian occupies a room where Mike lies in bed. He struggles to ask Brian where Janelle is. Brian is sorry to say she didn't survive. He changes the topic to a more hopeful one by saying they are going to heal him and escape. But Mike is pessimistic. He says no one is getting out of there. Once Grace arrives with the first aid kit, she starts to apply pressure on Mike's injury, causing him to scream in pain. This results in Brian grabbing Grace by the neck. He says she knows more than what she's telling them. Michelle tells him to stop, so he does. As Grace lies in discomfort on the floor, Brian crouches to tell her he will find a way out of the house. He warns her that she better not have anything to do with this situation. Then we see the man who arrived in the car. He exits it, and Will exits the house with Sid, both yelling to him that he call 911. When the man fearfully turns around, one of the culprits is there to subtract his life. We see another one walk behind Sid. He chooses to merely cut her arm instead of taking her life. Unable to fight back, she is forced to run away with Will. They hide in another area, where Will tends to her cut. Shifting to Grace, she tends to Mike's wound again, and Michelle says she's sorry for Brian's behavior. That isn't how he normally is. He was aggressive to Grace out of fear. Grace retorts that Michelle is scared, yet she doesn't behave like Brian did. Soon Michelle takes her arm to walk them both into the closet. Her reason for doing this was that she saw one of the culprits entering the room. He takes Mike's life, and all the ladies can do is watch from inside the closet. The first aid kit was bought for nothing. Lucky for the hiders, the masked man does not see them. Following this, Will tells Sid she should try running out. She declares she's not leaving him, but he says she has to. We learn they are siblings, Will being the younger one. He says she has always been the one to protect him. Now he wants to protect her. He wants her to go and call the police. If he perishes, she says, she will take his life. In the house, we focus on a culprit as he slowly walks around. Brian suddenly grabs him from behind, only to get stabbed in the leg. The intruder is about to take his life. However, Brian delivers the end to him first. At this moment, Nolan falls out behind a door from a room he was being kept in. He is restrained, and Brian urges him to be quiet. Switching to Michelle, she sees a motion sensor in the corner of the room. She says they just have to get to the alarm to call for help. The problem is that Grace is too afraid to leave the room. Thus, Michelle cries for her to help them. Then Brian talks to Nolan, saying he thought Nolan would know what's going on. Nolan is troubled as to why Brian would think this. Despite Brian thinking Nolan did this, he still undoes the man's restraints. Nolan says they were on their evening stroll and saw a car in the distance. He thought the people in it were lost, hence he went to help them, but they jumped out of the car to hit his head. He tells Brian there is an emergency alarm system in the kitchen. He can use it to contact the police. Since Nolan is incapable of walking, he wants Brian to go alone. All Brian has to do is touch the red call button. Therefore, he limps away from Nolan. Subsequently, Will enters the house to look for Michelle and Brian. In the meantime, Sid runs to her car, which is locked. She finds her phone under it. Alas, heavy misfortune strikes. Brian is outside getting shot down. Sid gets the same treatment. From inside the house, Will sees an armed culprit walk to Brian to shoot him a second time. Will begins to walk away in fear, but another intruder is there to knock him out from behind. The next scene has Michelle and Grace at the alarm system in the kitchen. Suddenly, Grace slams Michelle's head against the wall to knock her out. An intruder is nearby, getting asked by her where the others are. It seems like she was lying all along. Later, Michelle sits on the floor beside Will. They are both restrained. One of the masked people is sitting close to them. Will pleads that he let them go. Michelle informs him the enemies are the homeowners. The man removes his mask to reveal he is Marshall. He complains that Michelle had to ruin the surprise. Soon the rest of the family walks into the room, one by one. Will looks at Nolan with anger, and the latter says he wishes he could capture that image that he's seen over a dozen times. It is the moment of realization. Linda says there have been many others. Of course, Will calls them crazy. He demands to know how they could invite them simply to take their lives. Nolan replies the real question is why not. Will attempts to take action, but Marshall kicks him down. He even starts to choke him due to Will throwing insults at them. His dad has to tell him to stop. Then Linda says some of the best writers in history were slaves. They wrote beautiful stories of the homes and lands they came from. Sadly, no one cared about the stories. Nolan says that is the problem, that no one was going to buy a book written by a slave. At this point, Marshall tosses Will's manuscript of Dark Lake near the couple. It now states to have been written by Marshall, who says they own it. They have stolen for many generations. Nolan says there was a time long ago when Will's people were not destroyed. They just took the money and ran. The problem was that they were greedy. They wanted more credit plus more money. So Nolan's generation realized why pay the people if they can take their lives instead. This segues into Marshall stabbing Will in the stomach. Michelle tells them to take her life first, yet Grace says she has plans for her. Marshall is about to add Will to the list of deceased people, an action that gets interrupted by the light suddenly going out. Nolan tells his son to go check the breaker box, hence the evil man goes outside with his rifle. As he checks the breaker box, someone slams him down from behind. The person is none other than Sid. She angrily slams him a few more times, very likely claiming his life. The woman says she finally got him to be quiet. Nolan decides to go outside because Marshall is taking too long. During his leave, Michelle says someone will come for them. However, Linda says people like them go missing every day, and no one does anything about it. Then Grace heads to the front door, which is where she gets shot by Sid. Hearing this, Linda hides. Sid slowly walks into the house. Linda surprises her, trying to take the rifle away. Thankfully, Michelle manages to undo her restraints and puts the rope around Linda's neck from behind. Once she is dealt with, Sid says she doesn't know where Nolan is. The 3 survivors begin to leave the house. Nolan appears at this moment to ask them if they actually think they have won. He says they can't win, for the game is rigged. He stresses this is his family's story. Furthermore, he believes he decides when and where they will perish. The wicked man proclaims his family is never going to stop. How does Will respond to this speech? By gifting Nolan with a lethal bullet. Not stopping is now going to be rather difficult with all the family members lying lifelessly. While the surviving trio is at the front door, Michelle asks if anyone is going to believe them. Will answers her with another question, if they ever do. They walk out of the house, having acquired more than a movie.